The G20 kicks off in New Delhi, missing two of its highest profile leaders. While Vladimir Putin tries to avoid arrest under an ICC warrant, there's speculation Xi Jinping's no-show is a snub to host India. But others wonder if Xi's absence signals China's shifting views of the global world order. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is the G20 summit. Well, back in 2016, China pulled out all the stops when it hosted its first G20 summit. Cut to 2023, and President Xi Jinping has decided not to attend the New Delhi meeting, marking his first no-show since coming to power over a decade ago. Since then, tensions have escalated between major economic powers, the U.S. and China, over everything from tech restrictions to Taiwan, as well as the war in Ukraine. China has refused to condemn Russia's invasion and continued diplomatic support for President Vladimir Putin, who will also miss the India summit. So, is Xi's no-show a stand against a Washington-led world order? And what relevance will the G20 have without Russia and China?
Premier Li will lead a delegation to New Delhi, India, to take part in the G20 Leaders Summit. What I can tell you is that the G20 is an important forum for international economic cooperation. China has placed high importance on and actively participated in relevant events.
And are you disappointed that President Xi is not going to the G20? How do you explain that?
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see him.
Thank you.
But Xi Jinping did attend the BRICS summit in South Africa last month, where he met the Indian Prime Minister, and the two apparently agreed to intensify efforts to de-escalate tensions along their contested border. But a day after that, Beijing released a new standard map, claiming two Indian-recognized areas on that border. The decades-long dispute has implications for the entire region, including with shared neighbor and BRICS partner Russia. And some argue it's contributed to India's strengthening ties with the United States. The source of tension is a disputed de facto border that's almost 3,500 kilometers long. It's called the Line of Actual Control, or LAC. But it's poorly demarcated, with rivers, lakes, and snow caps, meaning lines can shift in various places. In June 2020, at least 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers were killed at the Galwan Valley in Ladakh in the first fatal confrontation between the two sides since 1975. The countries have held various rounds of military talks to diffuse tension, but there's been a string of non-lethal scuffles on the border since. Still, Indian diplomats have played down the dispute's impact on the G20.
At different points of time in G20, there have been some presidents or prime ministers who, for whatever reason, have chosen not to come themselves. But that country and that country's position is obviously reflected by whoever is the representative on that occasion. They are right now trying to hammer out the final document. I think everybody is coming with a great deal of seriousness.
So joining me now to discuss real or perceived underlying tensions at the G20 and whether the group can find a consensus are, from Ujjain, India, Gulrez Sheikh, a geopolitical analyst. In New York, we have Dmitry Polyanskiy. He's the first deputy permanent resident of Russia to the United Nations. And in Hong Kong is China strategist Andrew Leung. Thanks all so much for being with me. Let's pick up then where we just left off there. And Gulrez Sheikh, India has said that the absence of the Chinese and Russian presidents is normal and has nothing to do with India at all. Russia's absence, sure, but do you also believe Xi's absence has nothing to do at all with the host?
Well, as far as Mr. Vladimir Putin's absence, then it's a different issue, and Xi Jinping's absence, it's altogether a different issue. But yes, absence means it is not going to hamper the program because they are sending their people, their representative Sergei Lavrov from Russia. He's quite a tall figure in Putin administration, and so is the premier there in China. And the reasons behind their absence are different. So if you talk me first about Mr. Vladimir Putin, so as far as Russia is concerned, uh, for India, Russia is a time-tested partner, and Prime Minister Modi and President Putin shares a personal friendship bond with each other. Also, India is one of the biggest importer of Russian energy as well as Russian
Right, but the
defense
elephant in the
equipment.
room really is China. That's why I was asking specifically about China, because you've noted, geopolitical tensions are acute, not least India's own membership in the anti-Beijing Quad Alliance, as well as those border disputes.
But India is also a member in BRICS alliance. So not only we are a Quad, we are a neutral country and we are non-aligned country. But as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, he is not coming because of India. It's not true. He is not coming because the tensions and relationship between United States and China are at a nadir right now. And be it in the field of trade or technology or strategy or diplomacy. And due to this, President Xi is absent. Recently, we also saw the United States of America has sent so many secretaries like Defense Secretary, Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary to Beijing. But it is not working. And it looks like President Xi is not willing to meet Biden face to face, even in a neutral place like India. Plus,
Okay.
I think he might be he's also afraid of being ignored by the international leaders because his act vis-a-vis the cartographic aggression with so many countries as well as whatever he is doing with China might be condemned. And also there are reports right now that a delegation of 10 bipartisan parliamentarians from Australia is going to visit Taiwan.
Okay.
And
Before you go too
France.
far, I just want to pick up with Andrew Leung, if you share that same opinion as to why President Xi has not attended, and where do you think his lack of attendance actually leaves the overall influence of this meeting?
Well, I said right at the beginning that I didn't think that Xi's absence is not on India, nor it was the result of various periods of confrontation. Because don't forget that President Xi also met President Modi at the recent BRICS summit and on other occasions, and both agreed to de-escalate. And I agree that, and I've said at the beginning, that Xi's absence is more a reaction to the almost at war state between China and the United States. And of course, the G20 all likely to play to America's hymn book. Now, as far as this forum is concerned, there's no doubt that it's a battle for the global South because President Biden, before he came, already launched a series of initiatives, the kind of infrastructure development, the so-called participation for global infrastructure initiative, wanting to get something like 60 or $1 billion by 2027 as America's reaction against China's Belt and Road. So, and the United States realizes that the many countries in the Global South want to do not share Americans' hymn book. And for example, exemplify the recent lineup to join the BRICS. So this is a battle, a forum for the battle of the global South. And as far as China is concerned, as exemplified in the recent BRICS meeting, China has already got a head start as far as the global South is concerned. So there is no reason why President Xi should risk all these kind of pushback at the current G20 meeting.
But do you think it's fair, just very quickly, when certain analysts describe this as China, his non-attendance, as China taking a stand against a Washington-led world order?
Well, as I said, this is a battle for the global South, but also for the battle for a modified global order, not entirely tilted towards the United States hegemony. And no doubt that's what China wants, to rebalance the world order, because the world order is seen to be being hyped up, and all sorts of anti-China rhetoric and anti-China policies.
But some would just argue that he could do that from within the organization by participating and having a stronger voice within the summit itself. But okay, let me move on to Russia, because I want to take a look at Russia's role here. Dmitry, you have said that Moscow actually attaches great importance to the G20. So how much of a loss is it that your president is not attending?
Frankly, I don't see a problem here. I think we really should leave all these hypothetical constructions of leaders not being there because of such and such reasons to analysts. But let's not forget that the G20 is more about economy, and its core role is to avoid crisis in world economy and to preserve the stability of the markets and financial sphere. So this task is mostly relying upon the experts, and I think that both Russia and China are sending very strong expert delegations to New Delhi, and they are already there. They are working on the core documents of the summit. I don't see a problem there, frankly, and I think this would be a very good moment for the G20 to return to their mandate. And you know our position, that we think that the most difficult challenge that the G20 is facing comes from Western countries, which try to bring political issues to this economic forum, and which try to politicize the whole agenda of G20. So I think that the teams that we have in New Delhi will be able to deal with this challenge quite okay. It's not always necessary to bring our top leaders to such gatherings.
Is it politicized, though, if political leaders and analysts as well have noted that the war in Ukraine is actually what's bringing a political dynamic to this because of its consequences? It's created, from food supply issues to overshadowing everything in this summit. I mean, do you feel it's overshadowing this summit, or do you think, again, this is a politicized issue as well?
I feel that a lot of people just try to inflate this issue, trying to make it overshadow everything constructive that we still have at world arena, and we try to be constructive everywhere. We try to do business. The issue is that the consequences of military activities in Ukraine to world economy have been exaggerated. You know about the grain deal. You know about the real role of Ukraine in the world market, which does not exceed 5% of world grain market. So the place of Russia is 20%. It's much more important than Ukraine. So Western countries try to artificially raise the profile of Ukraine, its significance for world economy, totally ignoring the opportunities that would be open for feeding the poor and for humanitarian actions in the world if Russian agricultural exports and fertilizer exports would have been given the green light in the world as it was supposed to be in accordance with the grain deal. And let's also not forget the amount of money which Western countries are spending for arms to Ukraine and for assistance to Ukraine, which are being stolen in Ukraine, for sure. This amount of money would have been enough to feed a lot of people in the world. We calculated in PVM that the amount that the United States is paying for arms in Ukraine is the same amount that the whole humanitarian agencies of the world asked for the whole year of 2023. Okay. And they get only 15% of that. So how can it happen?
Let me ask Gulrez then about India's perspective here. India is not a proponent, obviously, of the war in Ukraine, but do you agree with what Dmitry said about why it should not be a real issue at this summit?
Yes, definitely, I agree with him because G20 is not a military alliance. It is basically a economic alliance, and that is the reason. Even after so much pressure from the Western world, India did not invited President Zelensky in G20 meeting because this will be definitely politicalization of the forum of G20, which is which we don't want to. And as he was also right when he was saying that as far as the grain deal is concerned, Ukraine's share is just 5%. That too in high income countries as well as middle income countries. Ukraine is not supplying grains to African poor countries or sub-Saharan countries. They are not supplying it.
Okay.
So as far as India is concerned, we don't want to politicize G20 or other forums which are not meant for military actions or for political actions.
Andrew Leung, is it that simple, I guess? And I mean, can we try now to highlight the positive? Yes, of course, there is a lot of discord, but not least even between India and China, and of course over the war in Ukraine. But what value is there in bringing this level of leadership together?
Well, even though the G20 is supposed to be a mainly economic kind of forum, but you can't separate economics from politics these days. And particularly even the United States, when she's trying to impose huge sanctions and restrictions against China's semiconductor industry, the American leaders will also say, well, that's not personal, it's just business. Well, that reminds me of Michael Corleone's a famous line in The Godfather. It's not personal, it's business. But in this forum, you can't separate economics from politics. And as I said, it's a battle for the global south. It's a battle for a shift in the world order. So the United States is likely to leave no stone unturned, even without saying so, to engineer some sort of a mechanics which would be detrimental to China's interest, because China is now seen as an existential threat to Americans' leadership or American hegemony. So I think that this is a very important forum. But be that as it may, the world is now changing into a more multipolar kind of environment, and no blocks are cast in stone. Even the other members of the G20, or for that matter, the BRICS Plus group. So no blocks can survive entirely in an ironclad fashion. So I think that what is seeing now is a tussle for global influence. And I think that we'll be able to see what actual details are coming up in the next couple of days.
Okay. Dmitry, I mean, you've heard a sort of counterpoint then to your earlier argument. I mean, how much is it really possible to separate global trade and business from politics? Do you really think it is?
I think it's in the core interest of the whole world to really tackle the issues that come from the actions of certain Western countries, from multi-annual actions of these countries who were provoking conflict in Ukraine for many years, as we know now, and who want to preserve their dominance at any price. So we need to separate their desire to politicize everything and to make Russia and China, to show Russia and China as enemies of the free world, with the interests of the global south, which are quite clear. And I think it's not a big problem for the West to accommodate these interests, provided they deny their condescending rhetoric and mentorship ideology. But they don't want to do it. They want to maintain pressure, to keep up pressure, and to use G20 for this as well. And that's a big challenge for G20.
Okay, let me come back to India because, speaking in a sense of political implications here, Gulrez, many are arguing that hosting the G20 has given Prime Minister Modi an opportunity to actually boost his campaign for re-election, and that he intentionally even swapped with Indonesia last year so that the G20 would coincide with his campaign. Now, some say it really is also manifest in the way Modi sent an invitation to the nation of Bharat instead of India. So what do you think are the domestic political implications then for India with the G20 summit?
Well, G20 or not, Prime Minister Modi is quite popular, and if you look at his ratings, not only by the Indian agencies but by the global agencies, the American agencies, he is enjoying the maximum rating of any world leader. So PM Modi does not need G20 for that. But and it is also wrong that we have swapped India with Bharat, because if you look at our constitution, in our constitution it is clearly mentioned India debt is Bharat. So constitutionally, both are the same things, and we can use it whenever we want. And as far as the swapping with Indonesia is concerned, it doesn't happen like that. In G20, it's a rotating presidency, and after Indonesia, it was already almost fixed that India will be getting the presidency. India got it, and we are doing it in a best possible way.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we're down to our last 5 minutes, so we need to look forward a little bit. Andrew, I'll start with you. I mean, the big question now is, will the G20 in this meeting find any consensus? What will result from these days?
Well, there's a lot at stake for President Modi being in the chair. I think having invested so much prestige and money into this forum, he would be extremely sad if not feeling a little bit put off if there's no agreed statement at the end amongst the members. Don't forget the fault lines, geopolitical fault lines, and the political fault lines are clearly there. But and that would include things like the Ukraine war, the confrontation between the United States and China, and so on and so forth. But if you could steer away from these minefields towards more meaningful agenda, in which most of the members would agree. For example, climate change, for example, stabilizing the world economy, and perhaps even seeking a role for the Global South in being represented more in the IMF and the banking institutions. And then there would be a much more meaningful agenda. And it's not just a form of words, because the importance of diplomacy is not just to seek the lowest common denominator, which would be just a form of words, but to perhaps seek the highest common denominator, so that both sides can agree on certain things that they could agree, staying away from the minefields, as I said. So I do hope that President Modi would be able to find a way to achieve a common statement to us at the end.
Dmitry, do you think this summit will be able to find enough commonality to produce a statement that can have some real value and worth?
Well, it's difficult to predict anything at this point. We don't have a crystal ball, and the meeting is still beginning. But we believe in the wisdom of our Indian friends, and we are absolutely ready to engage with them. I absolutely share the view of my Chinese colleague that the bulk of the agenda, maybe 90%, maybe even more of the issues, maybe 99%, do not create any problems to be agreed upon. And these are meaningful issues that G20 was created because of. So this very artificial drive to put Ukraine on top of everything, I think it's really a very big mistake of the collective West. And if they make the same mistake in New Delhi, I don't think it will be a failure of Indian presidency. It will be just another indicator that the collective West doesn't want to have a compromise on its absolutely ultimatum demands to the world leaders and to the task of imposing its agenda on top of everything.
Okay, Gulrez, your thoughts on the final outcome?
Well, we are optimistic that a consensus will be there, and especially in issues like climate change and also internet protocols. But we are working hard for one more thing. We want that African Union must get a permanent seat in G20, because if you look at African Union in combined, they are the eighth largest economy of the world. And when European Union can have a permanent seat there in G20, why not African Union? And this is unequal treatment. You can buy oil, you can buy diamonds, you can buy minerals from Africa, but you don't want to give them a representation. So India is working very hard for it, and I am optimistic that they will get a permanent representation.
And you'd
And
feel
that will actually,
Go ahead.
and actually, it will make G20 the largest multilateral organization after United Nations, because 1/4 of the world countries will be there as a part of G20.
You don't think BRICS is enough? They should be part of the G20 as well? Or the Global South, I should say, the Global South's representation shouldn't be just in BRICS countries, it needs to be in the G20 as well.
Let me make it very clear, and I am known for speaking truth, that the United Nations has failed, and it has become a body which represents the world of it is a shadow body of Second World War era and a unilateral world order. But things have changed, and that is the reason. Let it be BRICS, let it be G20. They have evolved, and they will continue to evolve, because we are not seeing changes in the UN, especially in the UN Security Council.
Okay, Gulrez, that will have to be the final word. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.